Anthem is the gaming equivalent of getting blue-balled by a bad girlfriend who just happens to be great in the sack. Now, when I played the Anthem VIP demo, I realized the game was in a very rough state. Performance issues, poorly designed UI, the disconnect between gameplay and Fort Tarsis, infinite loading screens, server load problems, unoriginal quest design, etc. The list of Anthem issues is so long we could be in here talking about them for the entire duration of this video. So let's just say the game wasn't even close to being ready for launch. But at the same time, there were certain things that grabbed my attention. The visuals were great, the animations were good, the sounds and soundtrack were very good, the combat and flight were incredibly fun, and you can crap on Anthem all you want, but when it comes to flying your javelin and using the javelin abilities to destroy enemies, it was extremely satisfying. One of the reasons I think the javelins were so much fun to control is because they made them incredibly powerful. The abilities were on very short cooldown, they had a cool combo system, and the sense of impact and visual spectacle was phenomenal, particularly the ultimates. And this is what compelled me to give Anthem a shot. I just really liked the power fantasy of the javelins. But naturally, the game was released and more issues started rearing their ugly heads, such as the fact that most of the campaign was a sequence of those unoriginal quests I mentioned previously. Things like control this point, kill these enemies, pick up this thing and put it in that thing. And this got repetitive fairly quickly, and to some players the Javelin Power Fantasy simply wasn't enough to propel them through the story, especially when you take into account the artificial expansion of the campaign through the Tomb Trials, which required players to do a bunch of busy work in order to progress through the story. And naturally, all of the game's bugs and glitches didn't help. Anyway, as Anthem stumbled and limped into its post-release cycle, Bioware started patching the game in hopes of fixing its many problems. And in one of those patches I realized there was another issue with Anthem, and this one was significantly more problematic and essentially changed the tone of all my future Anthem content. Because you see, it was hard enough to cover Anthem while being constantly slammed in the comment sections of my videos for covering a bad game, but it became even harder when I realized these patches made no sense whatsoever and weren't even being tested before deployment on live servers. Bioware's efforts to getting the game into a better state revealed a complete lack of vision. They were just fixing each individual problem without looking at the bigger picture. One example of this was when they buffed weapons, melee abilities, and ultimates to try and get players to play on the harder difficulties. But they didn't actually add any additional rewards for playing in those harder difficulties, so essentially they just made the game easier without actually solving any of the problems they were trying to tackle. And just like this example, there were plenty more as the patches kept rolling in. And the more I covered the game, the more my disappointment grew, until eventually the Jason Schreier article came, which gave us a much-needed look into the development hell Anthem had gone through. But interestingly enough, it also revealed that the Anthem development team was actually quite talented. They just lacked proper leadership to make use of those talents. And some of you will call me a lunatic for saying something so bold, but according to Jason's article, the Anthem we saw on release day was developed in less than 2 years. Think about it. Less than 2 years to implement a flight system that feels incredibly fun, make it work in combat situations, work on animations, come up with a story, design mission structure, loot, javelin abilities. It's insane. Now, I'm not saying this is an excuse for the poor state Anthem was in during its release, because whatever problems the team went through during the game's development is not the consumer's responsibility. We weren't the ones forcing Frostbite down Bioware's throat. We weren't the ones developing Anthem in a fracking bubble whilst ignoring other games in the same genre. And we weren't the ones saying, Bioware magic is going to make everything okay. No, that was the leadership of the Anthem development team. And interestingly enough, that leadership has been moving away from the project since its release date, with executive producer Mark Dara and lead producer Michael Gamble moving on to other projects within the company, Dragon Age 4 if I'm correct. Lead director Jonathan Warner was forced to take some personal time due to family, but it is unclear if he will return to the project at any point. Ben Irving, who was the current lead producer and essentially the public face of Anthem, has left the company altogether. And Chad Robertson, who was supposedly the person in charge of Anthem's live service, has also left the company. And this brings us to the main topic of today's video. Jason Schreier has published another article where, according to inside sources, Bioware is working on a complete overhaul for Anthem. There's no timeline for this overhaul, but assuming the article is accurate, the team has been working on this update for quite some time, taking a few months to break everything down in order to figure out what needed changing, and surprise, surprise, it's a lot, and since then, they're already a couple of months into rebuilding the game. Apparently, as with everything Anthem-related, nothing is really set in stone yet, so they still don't know if they will be fixing the game with incremental updates, kind of like No Man's Sky, or if they'll go the big expansion route like Destiny's Taken King expansion. These were two of the examples mentioned in the article, but personally, I hope they wouldn't go for either. I'd rather see them go the route of Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. That is to say, push the reset button. And I know that a lot of players will go ballistic, but more legendary loot! But at the end of the day, I don't think a series of incremental upgrades are going to fix Anthem. Not by a long shot. You need to push the reset button. Have one last big cataclysmic event, turn off the servers, and completely revamp the game top to bottom without having to worry about how changing a line of code here or there is going to impact live servers. I look at most MMOs and MMO-like games as temporary progression. There's nothing permanent about them because the moment you get an expansion, most of your gear becomes almost instantly useless and you start on a new path of progression, which leads you to replace everything anyway. So deleting everything and starting over fresh seems like a much better approach. According to the article, another possibility is releasing the next iteration of Anthem as a whole new game. And I think that's a terrible idea. You can't just publish another Anthem title without fixing the current one because you won't have any goodwill from your player base. Regardless of the solution, they said it's unlikely they'd charge a full price for Anthem players. Let me be perfectly clear on this part. Whatever solution they end up implementing, assuming this Anthem reboot project moves forward, it better be 100% free for existing players, and they better shower their current player base in veteran perks like shop currency and unique cosmetics. In order to better understand the current state of Anthem, I actually jumped into the game recently after a long hiatus. And I gotta say, jumping back into my Colossus and stumping some scars was friggin' sweet. For a couple of hours, as I reacquainted myself with the game's mechanics and looked into its current gameplay loop. Because as always with Anthem, once you look past its combat and flight mechanics, most of the other systems start falling apart. Starting with the fact that I still can't complete all of my Fort Tarsis quests, I've had this bug since launch day, then moving on to the fact that I can't experience the cinematic questline that leads into the Cataclysm. I mean, did they really make that questline limited to the patches before the Cataclysm? But anyway, then I started looking into the only thing anyone really cares about, which is endgame loot. And basically, with their current gameplay loop, there is very little reason to run any other content besides the Cataclysm. Because you see, from my limited experience in the Cataclysm, it has the highest amount of chests per hour of any other content you run, therefore increasing your potential rewards per time spent playing. But that's not all. Each run of the Cataclysm nets you a special currency which you can then use on special chests, which give you access to a whole new tier of gear that makes any of the gear available in other content obsolete. And I'll admit, the Cataclysm is more interesting than I initially gave it credit for, but at the end of the day, it's still not my kind of content. Having to deal with a timer whilst trying to find all of the secrets in an area is quite simply not my idea of a good time, but that's neither here nor there. Whether you like the Cataclysm or not, the fact of the matter is the game still has a very long way to go if it expects to truly make a comeback, and this reboot might just be what the doctor ordered. When talking about the potential changes to come, Jason's sources said Bioware is putting a lot of work into Anthem. They plan to overhaul the loot, the quests, the social aspects, the difficulty, the progression system, and even the world map. One of the things that I found interesting was that Jason's sources claimed right now the entire world of Anthem is set on a single large map, when this is factually wrong. There is a big map you can navigate in free play, but that map actually has multiple sections that are separated through loading screens. And not only that, but there's also the strongholds, which are instanced areas that aren't even available on that map. But anyway, Bioware want to split the main map into smaller sections because apparently this will allow them to make changes on each individual section without breaking something in the other sections. Another thing they are looking into is the need to head back to Fort Tarsis after every mission. And what a mission technically is? And here's my thoughts in regards to that. Fort Tarsis was an interesting idea. Love it or hate it, it did provide some stories that gave you some more background into the world of Bastion, but at the end of the day, it didn't work. A majority of Anthem's player base hated Fort Tarsis, and in order for the game to truly evolve and potentially experience a successful reboot, Fort Tarsis just needs to go. Nobody wants to go to Fort Tarsis. Nobody cares about Fort Tarsis. If anything, people actively dislike Fort Tarsis and just see it as a waste of time. Now, like I mentioned previously, the path I'd like to see them take for a reboot of this nature would be the Realm Reborn route. And an interesting way to do that would be to actually blow up Fort Tarsis. Fort Tarsis comes under assault by one of the enemy factions and they successfully destroy it. Hell, you can even make that into a player mission so the players can experience the final moments of Legacy Anthem, just like they did with Final Fantasy XIV. Speaking of which, I really need to get back into Final Fantasy XIV at some point. And now I know what a lot of you are thinking, if you even bothered to watch the video this far, and that is, does this game even deserve a second chance? Does it deserve to find success considering the poor quality of the product they put out at launch, their inability to stick to the roadmap, their lack of overall vision for the game? And the answer is no, it doesn't. They burned their community, they burned their own development team, and they still don't seem to have a clear direction as to where they want to take the game. I mean, 9 months after release and you're still trying to figure out what the structure of a mission in your game should be? That's completely ridiculous. But whereas initially I saw the departure of the producers and directors of Anthem as a sign of Bioware abandoning the game, I'm now beginning to wonder if that's not exactly what the project needed. New blood at the helm to fix the mistakes of the old guard, if they even can be fixed. In a lot of ways, it makes sense for Bioware to do their best to restore faith in their community, because if they can't fix Anthem, they're going to have one hell of a hard time marketing Dragon Age 4 and the next Mass Effect. The gaming community does not forget, nor does it forgive. So I know a lot of people will just want to see Bioware and EA burned at the stake for what they've done to Anthem, as well as a lot of their other titles. My personal take, I enjoyed Anthem's combat. I'd like to continue to enjoy that combat in a more meaningful game. Even though I know they don't deserve a second chance and I'm tremendously disappointed in their lack of vision, if they eventually fix the game, I'll be coming back to kick some more ass with my Colossus. At the end of the day, if Final Fantasy XIV would have crashed and burned, we would have never gotten a Realm Reborn, or any of the following expansions. If Hello Games gave up on No Man's Sky, we would have never gotten a No Man's Sky Beyond. And no, this shouldn't be an industry standard practice, but even if Anthem doesn't get fixed, Bioware will still go on to publish Dragon Age 4 and the next Mass Effect. EA is still going to be around with their FIFAs and their Maddens. For all intents and purposes, Anthem has already failed. What does anyone have to lose if they fix it for the small community that is still playing the game? That being said, if they even dream of charging a single cent to the current Anthem player base, frack them. Frack them all. Thank you very much for watching the video. What are your thoughts on the topic? Would you like to see Anthem get fixed, or would you rather it remain crippled for life? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. If you didn't enjoy the video, leave a dislike. Feedback is important. If you enjoy my content, feel free to subscribe and ring the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong, and may your shields never break.